Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it is time for the Q&As, so let's go ahead and knock this out. Alright, first question. Hey Jason, can you please cover the topic of weightlifting and arterial stiffness? Several recent studies have shown that long-term weightlifting causes arterial stiffness. This is a known risk factor for cardiac disease. Is this arterial stiffness benign because it was caused by healthy activities as opposed to being caused by being obese, hypertensive, diabetic, etc.? You know what, that's a great question, and actually I've seen studies going back as far as 1999, so not even that recent, discussing this. And what they note in a lot of the studies is that there's kind of a paradox there, because weightlifting in general has been associated very, very strongly with reduced mortality. It has been also associated with extended life and extended quality of life, meaning your quality of life stays much, much higher, much later in life if you routinely resistance train. So it's kind of a paradox there that they find this correlation with arterial stiffness. Now, what's interesting enough, there are other forms of exercise, particularly, various forms of cardio endurance work, which reduce arterial stiffness. So I would suggest to you that because weight training in general has some health factors that get worse, but overall it dramatically improves your lifespan and quality of life, that the few things that it does cause that are negative can be reversed with other activities, and in this case, namely cardiovascular training. If you do enough endurance work or cardio work, it should go ahead and offset and reverse those negative effects and improve them. So people who do pretty large amounts of cardio, reasonable levels of cardio, are going to have still better arterial stiffness than the average person, even if they weight lift. So your solution to this problem is to make sure you're doing plenty of cardio. If you want to have good cardiovascular health, you need to do cardio in addition to your weight training, even though weight training has, in other areas, it offers benefits for health and longevity that other activities simply cannot accomplish. You still need to be doing your cardio. All right, next question. Hey Jason, thought maybe you can explain a bit more on how to do one set per body part workouts like you in order to get in and out of the gym ASAP, including stuff like how many reps are optimal, how to deal with plateaus, etc. And also, will this be enough volume for legs working out 3 times a week? Alright, there's simply no way to answer most of your question in one video, because how many reps should you do? How should you deal with plateaus? Things like that. These are things I have an individual series of videos discussing. This isn't something you can cover all here, because the same rules that apply to multi-set or even higher volume training are still going to apply to all of these rules. You're probably going to need to periodize a little bit. You're probably going to need to do deloads. You're probably going to need to back off every now and then. You're also going to have times where you might want to do extended sets like rest pause training and things. So it's not a one size fit all thing when you're talking about coming in and doing one set. However, one thing that I will say is that because you are only doing one set, you will probably do much better, particularly if you're a drug-free lifter or even a very modestly enhanced lifter, if you do full body when you do these. Because again, you're only doing one set, you need to include every exercise that you think that you need to hit all the important body parts. Meaning, yeah, you could come in and you could base it upon doing a squat, deadlift, push, press, and weighted chin-ups and weighted dips, and you could come in and do one set of all 5 of those exercises, and that will cover all your bases. But you probably need to do some stuff for your weak points also, meaning if your biceps are still a weak link in there, you might want to do a set of curls. If your side delts are still a weak point and all of that, you might want to do a set for those in there. So what you need to understand is that since you're training such low volume, you need to capitalize on full body programs, their ability to increase protein synthesis and everything, and make sure that you're hitting every muscle that you want to grow with something very effective. 1, maybe even 2 exercises for it, again, due to the very, very low volume per exercise. And I'm not even saying you can't rotate through exercises day to day, as long as all your bases are covered, and particularly all of your weak points, both whether it's size-wise or even athletically. You need to make sure that your weak points get worked effectively every single time that you train if you want to utilize this type of training system. That's just the way to approach it. But remember, as far as the other things go, you're still going to need to utilize possible periodization, deloads, weight resets, all sorts of things. Those things don't go away as far as determining how to deal with plateaus and everything just because you're only doing one set. All right, next question. Greetings, Jason. Could you explain how to properly carb up for a photo shoot or show please give some tips for a drug-free person who wants to look as full and dry as possible. If you could be so kind, please talk about water, sodium, carbs, and fat manipulation on specific days before event, 5 to 1 days out. Also, do you think drinking 100 milliliters of vodka the night before the event would be beneficial? Thank you for your hard work. All right, most of this is pretty straightforward. These are methods that have been tried and true by tons of people. I know a lot of different coaches who give people advice on this, and a lot of them seem to actually give fairly similar advice. Now, one thing I'm going to mention, if you don't know what you're doing and you're still new to trying to do these things, don't mess with your sodium intake. Don't start manipulating electrolytes. They can go very, very badly for you. Number two, the thing that you need to remember, if you're drug-free, you're never going to look as full, anywhere near as full and tight as people utilizing drugs will when you're really lean and doing a photo shoot or something. You cannot replicate what they can pull off to get kind of that Photoshop shrink wrap look. It's just not going to happen. And in fact, even everyone on drugs doesn't experience that. A lot of people use very specific drugs the day of a photo shoot to achieve that look that not all of the drugs that they're using are going to do. So just keep that in mind. You're not going to replicate that look fully. But what I would recommend is that you need to cut your carbs back. Maybe even cut your protein back at least a week out, as far as maybe 10 days out before your photo shoot. And go ahead and increase your water intake a little bit. You want to start water loading when you get about 5 to 6 days out, but keep go on almost a ketogenic style diet as you're approaching it. That way you deplete muscle glycogen and you start dropping water weight. And then depending upon the person, you're going to need to experiment with this a little bit. Starting 1 to 2 days out, start adding simple carbs back in. And again, this is going to depend on the person, because some people will do a 24-hour carb up and they end up looking even better and fuller and tighter the next day afterwards. So you're going to need to experiment with this a little bit for yourself. If you want to play it safe though, starting 24 hours out, go ahead and reduce your water intake slightly, because you want a water load starting 5 days out, probably double your water intake. Go back to your normal water intake at that point. You don't want to come in and be really dry. And again, unless you've got a real expert coaching you on this in terms of the amount of water intake. But if you cut back to your normal water intake, maybe 16 to 24 hours out, you'll continue to urinate out the excess water that your body started doing by over drinking water for 5 days. And then you cut back to a normal healthy amount of water. You'll continue to, for up to 24 hours, keep excreting out the additional water that your body was used to taking in. So this makes this kind of a dry carb up. You need to keep your fiber really low, and you need to cut your fat down fairly moderate, because again, what you're going to have happen, anything that's going to upset your GI tract is going to cause it to bloat more inside your intestines and can cause some diarrhea, and then that in turn will mess with your fluid balance, cause cramping. So start adding simple sugars back in, simple carbs, things like white bread if you're not if you don't have celiacs or anything, white rice, rice cakes. Sugars, as long as they're lower fiber fruits, things like watermelon are probably okay. Again, some fruits, a little bit of even refined sugars is probably not a bad thing here. Go ahead and start loading in some refined sugars. If you want a slice of cake or some cookies, eat some. Just don't overload yourself to the point to where you're going to cause water swelling inside your GI tract, and you need to keep your dietary fiber really low. Again, you're trying to not bloat your gut up. You're trying to get fast enough digesting carbs that they're all going to your muscle tissue. And then, yeah, like you said, drinking some vodka the night before, or even up to 100 milliliters, a few shots. Some people might even do the full bottle. Drinking vodka the night before will help dehydrate you, and since you're eating all of these carbs, your muscles are going to super compensate a little bit. So you're going to go ahead and fill back out, and it's going to suck extra subcutaneous water out. It's going to make you look fuller, tighter, and leaner than you are. It's a pretty straightforward process. Just don't be too extreme with it in any direction, so that you don't cause gastrointestinal upset, your stomach to bloat, or any sort of diarrhea or cramping. All right, next question. You said in your Ice Cream Fitness 5x5 video that if you aren't rowing 3 times a week, you're shortchanging your back development. Do you still take this stance? If so, why? Yeah, I still partially take this stance. I'm not saying you have to row, but what you see with a lot of full body programs out there, they have people alternating the row and the deadlift. I don't do that on the Ice Cream Fitness 5x5. And the reason is that while the deadlift absolutely does work your lats in large numbers of areas of your back, it doesn't do it as effectively, your lats particularly, as a row or a weighted chin-up or a weighted pull-up could. So you should be doing one of those 3 probably 3 times a week, unless you're not strong enough to do chin-ups, or pull-ups, in which case lat pull-downs will suffice in the meantime, or even machine rows if that's all that you can do. But you need to be doing some sort of direct lat work 3 times a week in order to facilitate maximum back size. Again, this is for drug-free lifters, by the way, or very modest users, because otherwise you're simply not getting enough muscle protein synthesis uptime, and you're not going to maximize your back development. Again, a lot of these programs, you see things like, well, they're rotating through chest presses with overhead presses and stuff. Also, that's still working all of the chest and the delts and the triceps and everything, whereas in the back tends to get a little shortchanged on some of the full body programs that are out there. So ideally, yeah, you want to be doing some type of direct back work 3 days a week if you want to have the biggest lats possible. All right, next question. For an individual who has very little cardio endurance, what would your recommended program be to increase his endurance while still trying to run your novice program, and doing so without becoming so tired that it prevents you from weightlifting? Assuming no history of ever having high endurance, and assume muscle weakness is a factor in the problem, because every time I try to add in cardio, I end up stalling on my lifts and frying my CNS. That's probably because you're trying to increase your cardio too fast, or you're adding in higher intensity cardio, which is going to mess with a very high volume, very high workload program like my novice program, the 5x5. What I'm going to recommend is you start with just brisk walking. Just go start walking around the block for 15 minutes every single day, and slowly increase that over time till you can get to 30 minutes, or get on a bike and do some just list cardio, and again starting at about 15 minutes, and just over the course of a couple of weeks bringing that up to 30 minutes a day. That's how you get away with doing this sort of thing. And if you're doing any sort of interval training or high intensity cardio, and you're trying to run an aggressive program like my novice 5x5, of course it's going to start causing some stalling. But if you start with very mild cardio, if you have no endurance anyways, you're going to need to start with very mild cardio and just slowly work your way up over the time, over the days, the weeks, and the months. And that's how you avoid stalling on any sort of intense program like that. All right, next question. Training when injured. I've recently broken my finger, so any heavy back work is out. Luckily, I am cutting. Possible to not lose strength and size if I switch to 15 to 20 reps of lightweight, or should I forget it and squat more? Normally, I don't recommend those hooks. You'll notice that there are these straps that people put around the wrist that have hooks on them so that they can do all of their pulling without using their grip at all. Consider getting a pair of those. If you've got a broken finger or a broken hand and you still want to be able to pull fairly heavy, get some of those hooks, those grip hooks. That's a fantastic tool for this. I don't think they're a good idea for anything else, but they're definitely good for this. So go give that a try, and you don't need to go to 15 to 20 reps on all of your pulling exercises, because you might find in some cases that without any heavy work, you might start losing muscle mass in your back and everything as a result of doing that. But it really depends on the individual. But there's no need to make a drastic change like that. Again, you're cutting, you just need to maintain your strength. Go get some of those hooks, and realize that once your finger heals, you're going to need to do a lot more grip work to get caught back up, because your grip strength is going to be shot. But that's okay. You've got an injury to deal with, so there's nothing you can do about that. So just get some of those hooks and do your normal back work, and maybe even cut everything down 5%. Because if you can maintain 95% of the normal weight you use on the bar while you're cutting, that should be sufficient to actually maintain your performance and your size, as long as you don't cut too aggressively. All right, next question. Hey Jason, I'm running your beginner program. If I miss a day, say I started Sunday morning as my Monday, then I train Tuesday but can't make it till Saturday, should I go on Saturday, or just chalk it up as a deload and wait till Sunday again so I don't throw the whole next week off? Or is that just overthinking it? All right, when you're running any sort of program that you have structured weeks and blocks in, if you miss a day or a workout and have to delay it one day and you get everything shifted over one day, or you miss a whole workout and you have to shift the whole program over 2 days, you simply shift the whole program over 2 days. It doesn't matter what was considered to normally be your Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You'll simply have to change that. What you were doing on Wednesdays now becomes your Friday workout. What you were doing on Fridays now becomes your Monday workout. You just shift it over accordingly. And actually, like my novice program runs on an A-B. It doesn't run on a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You alternate workout A with workout B, with your new weights being determined by what you did the day before. So if you miss a B workout, you just do a B workout next time and then go back to A-B, A-B. Everything's just shifted over one day. So you're normally actually not even running. If you're running it 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, it's not a Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's an A-B-A, B-A-B, so on and so forth when you go to each week. So you're not really shifting anything. Just go to the B workout again. If you miss a B workout, then do a B workout again next time and just continue the program as normal and count the missed days as if they were just your day off, no matter how many of them there were. If there were 3 of them because you had to shift it over, then just go in as if they were your one day off and continue the program as normal. Pretty straightforward. All right, next question. Hey Jason, you've talked a lot about how when a drug-free lifter is stupid shredded, they look starved and flat. However, individuals on gear don't have this issue. Is it simply a matter of retaining less mass better? Does it work through another pathway involving fluid balance, etc.? It works through a couple different pathways. A big part of that is the fact that people retain muscle mass much, much better when they're using anabolics of any type. Let's just be realistic here. You are always going to lose some muscle mass when you are cutting very, very lean. It is unavoidable. So you're going to lose muscle. Even people on drugs sometimes lose some muscle if they get lean enough and they're big enough to where they don't, versus the amount of drugs they're using, they're going to tend to lose a little bit of muscle anyways. Even those guys do oftentimes, again, unless they're using hefty amounts or they're fairly new to their drugs, whatever. And the other factor there is going to be nutrient partitioning. It has to do with how well they store glycogen and glucose in their muscles. Drugs facilitate, many of the drugs, some to a greater and lesser extent than others. So again, you can't just lump everything into drugs or anabolics. It doesn't work that way. But some of them to a greater or lesser extent cause superior nutrient partitioning. They cause superior glycogen storage and even a shift in what fuel substrates you're burning. So someone who burns more fat and less carbs by default due to drugs they're on, who is also on a drug that causes their muscle tissue to store all excess glucose they eat immediately and store it in there, occasionally even burning it just off as fuel and heat, but storing everything that they eat in their muscle tissue, they are always going to look bigger and fuller on the same diet as someone who isn't on anything. And you're never going to be able to replicate that look that the drugs are able to give because they allow superior storage of glycogen for later to use as a fuel source than people who are in the normal hormone ranges. And so accordingly, they're going to tend to look thicker and fuller and rounder as a result of that. Now, is that a guarantee? No, because some of these drugs actually cause people to look flat and everything also because of the way that they work unless they add other drugs back in. Some people can actually still look flat and stringy while using anabolics and drugs purely because those drugs themselves cause a different effect than some others do, particularly some of the pure cutting drugs. So even that's not an absolute, but it comes down to one, better muscle retention, and two, vastly superior nutrient partitioning and glycogen storage. And that latter is the biggest factor there and why people on drugs can look so much dramatically different when they're really ripped to people who are completely clean. All right, next question. Hey Jason, as stated in your recent video that said that 70 to 90% of diseases are caused by a person's lifestyle, does that study also apply to testicular cancer in young men where there are specific age ranges of when men can contract the disease? Thanks. Actually, that study, that meta-analysis showed that it was cancers specifically. It wasn't all diseases. It was just dealing with cancers in various types. The reason you're given a range there is because different types of cancers are going to be affected by these at different rates. That's why it was such a broad range of saying 70 to 90, because it varies a lot. And I didn't see the specifics on individual cancers. You'll need to look into the full research yourself to see which cancers are 90%, which cancers seem to be closer to 70%, so that you can get a better idea yourself. As far as testicular cancer goes, obviously there can be lifestyle factors involved. People who weight train, for example, tend to get all cancers at a much, much lower rate. So that would include testicular cancer. I would suggest that the reason you see some young men getting testicular cancer so often who lift weights is probably, again, due to the much higher chance that guys who lift weights are going to use various androgens and anabolics, which could absolutely be a factor in testicular cancer, combined with the propensity for eating excessive amounts of food. A lot of bulking and cutting and going back to bulking all the time can actually increase cancer rates also. It's generally going to be pretty well offset by the weight training, but just repeatedly bulking and forcing yourself to gain pretty significant amounts of weights due to all the additional IGF-1 that's going to be elevated as a result of it could, in theory, be a big factor in people getting cancer. So these could actually be factors in, say, Furious Pete's testicular cancer, which I think people or interested in on YouTube because he is a famous YouTuber who got it, I'm sure that both are probably factors. It could have been a drug use factor, and his eating challenges could have both contributed. Are they probably the only causes? Probably not. But are they most likely contributing factors? Sure. All right, next question. If a drug-free lifter is trying to utilize the Bulgarian light style of training for strength, what kind of sets and reps should be spent on a given exercise? All right, that one's pretty easy. You shouldn't be doing very much volume at all. If you're trying to do Bulgarian light as a completely drug-free lifter, all of your big lifts, you need to come in and hit a training max. When you train, which means one rep at around 90% max, or at 9 out of 10 on the rate of perceived exertion scale, basically the heaviest weight you can do for a single while still maintaining perfect form and fast bar speed. And then on days to where you're feeling stronger, particularly on your big lifts, you can do a back off set of 3 reps with around 85% of your max. So a single followed by a single back off triple. And you could probably do that every workout if you're only doing it 4 days a week. But if you start pushing it out to the 6-day a week and you're doing like a squatting every day, for example, you might want to limit those back off sets to just days where you're feeling your strongest and able to perform them. So maybe your strongest 3 days that week. And you could follow that same protocol for everything. And again, I would recommend if you're going to do any accessory work, staying with maybe one set in the 5 to 10 rep range. So let's say you're doing some overhead pressing, or rows or weighted chin-ups or whatever you happen to be doing for some extra accessory work to put on size, I would limit those to maybe one set of 5 to 10 reps. But all the big lifts that you're trying to train the motor patterns on, again, one single followed by, on the days you feel strongest, a back off triple. That's generally what you're going to find works best to not bury yourself while doing pretty much very high frequency training max squatting like Bulgarian light. All right, next question and last question of the week. How do you stay sexy with all the hate thrown your way? That's a great question because I do get a tremendous amount of hate thrown my way, but at the same time, I still seem to maintain my sexy. And a lot of people would tell you that sexy is all in your mind, that it's just mindset. And while there is some truth to that, I'm going to say the truth is sexy for a man is really in your beard. I maintain my sexy with all the hate that's thrown my way by using a good beard oil. These days I'm using a brand called Woody's. And I have some other stuff, but I really like the Woody's lately. I find that the beard oil, when I get it worked into my beard good, combing out and everything, that it gives my beard that luxurious, sexy look that just exudes sexiness in general. And that is what helps me maintain my sexy, is keeping my beard luxurious and slick and full with a good beard oil. Works wonders for maintaining your sexy when you're under any sort of stress, catching hate, anything else. Because if your beard is sexy and you're a man, you're going to exude sexiness. There's just no way to avoid it. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.